I bring fraternal greetings right now from 37,000 New York City transit workers, members of TW Local 100. If I was making these remarks a month ago, I'd be bringing greetings from 38,000 New York City transit workers. Unfortunately, a guy from London named Jay Walder, who I'm sure some folks in the room are aware of, he's in the process of trying to remake New York City Transit into what he believes New York City needs and wants. And in doing so, he's laid off about 900 New York City Transit workers since May 1st. So we are embroiled in a massive battle against the MTA and state government in New York State. Walder has quite deceitfully capitalized on our current financial crisis to implement what he deems as his vision of how the subway system and the bus system in New York City should go. And that means fewer people, fewer human beings being replaced by digital signage and whatnot, human beings being replaced by technology, and a rearranged system that entails night and weekend service of all kinds and forces people off the buses into the subway, forces our disabled folks in New York City to find alternative means to run their lives in any kind of reasonable manner. He's gone so far as to throw New York City school children off the buses and make them pay full fare to go to school. So he's come to New York with quite an agenda, and I'm sure that he was in London with quite an agenda, but he's our problem now, and we're fighting him tooth and nail. Tooth and nail. And I don't know what the RMT did to this guy in London, but he came to New York with a definite chip on his shoulder. And a game plan to put TW Local 100 in our place. But he has not succeeded in doing that, and he will not succeed in doing that. The fight with Walder has actually become very personal for me, to the point where I no longer speak to the guy one-on-one, because in all honesty, at the end of the day, he's a lousy, rotten, miserable, anti-worker bastard. And I just don't, you know, he doesn't quite like me either, and we've never quite hit it off. And the fact of the matter is, I'm a track worker from Brooklyn. I was raised with blue-collar parents, both in trade unions. My father was worked in the Gansevoort meat market in Manhattan. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's the meat market on the Lower West Side of Manhattan that services all of the restaurants in the New York City area with provisions, beef, chicken, and whatnot. So he spent his whole life there as a lugger, and my mother was basically a lifelong Teamster. She worked for the UAW at one point also. You know, I come from a completely different world than this guy. I was raised in Brooklyn, barely making it. This guy comes to New York, he's making $350,000 a year with another $60,000 housing allowance. He lives right now in a swanky apartment in New York City, at great cost to New York City taxpayers, at great cost to New York City transit riders, and at great cost to TW Local 100 members who work on the railroad tracks and in the buses in New York City. So my opinion of Walder is that he's an arrogant, overeducated, elitist snob who's never done a hard day's work in his life, and that's a direct quote from what I actually told him in a phone conversation on Friday. I wasn't necessarily focusing on Walder, but now I am. He's come to New York. He's made it very clear that he's seeking to tear up our hard-fought contract. Alex mentioned Irish immigrants. It wasn't only Irish immigrants in the 1930s, Italian immigrants, immigrants from across the world. They were predominantly Irish. Blood was spilled in the streets of New York City in the 1930s, organized in this transport workers union that right now we're a part of, and that we're bearing the fruits from what the folks who came before us fought against guys like Walder 50, 60 years ago. And we're not about to let that go. We're not about to let Jay Walder and this team from London that he brought in with another guy named Charlie Mannheim. I'm not sure if that name rings familiar to you, but he's come to town and he's essentially holding a gun to Local 100, telling Local 100, if you don't agree to massive contractual concessions, we're going to lay folks off. And at the end of the day, we're not going to agree to massive contractual concessions. We're not going to allow him to use this fiscal crisis to capitalize on us in a way that we open up the contract to him and leave ourselves vulnerable going in the years ahead. But what we will do is fight tooth and nail to get our folks back to work, and we're in the process of doing that right now. One thing that Walder is intent on doing, and I would be interested to talk later on to see if folks have the same experience from his time in London, but what he's attempting to convince us to do, and he's attempting to convince the New York State Legislature to pressure us to do, is to sell out folks that aren't in our union yet, folks that are coming that are in high school right now. He wants them to start on our job at a lower wage with an onerous wage progression. Right now, the wage progression to top pay for New York City transit workers is 3 years. He's looking to make it 7 years. Right now, the pension for New York City transit workers is retirement at age 55, as long as you have 25 years of service. He's looking to make that pension 30 years of service with retirement at age 62 with increased contributions. And I know there's folks in here that work on the railroad tracks like I did until 6 months ago. And you can't work on the railroad tracks, you can't work on a rail gang when you're 60 years old with 2 years to go. You cannot do it. It's impossible to do. So the expectation from Walder is that Local 100 is going to acquiesce to his concession demands. We're going to fold, and he's going to take those concessions, agree to put a few folks back to work without a guarantee of a future no layoff clause, and in 6 or 8 months from now, lay off a different wave of workers and come back to the union for more concessions. So the union would be, well, the president of the union, who's me, would be a lunatic to agree to Walder's proposals right now, and that's what we're facing in New York City. So he's essentially holding a gun to our union and saying we're going to continue to lay off Local 100 members, New York City transit workers, unless we agree to this crazy concession package. And as long as I'm the president of the union, that's not going to happen on my watch. We're just not going to do that. We will choose to fight him tooth and nail on the railroad tracks, in the bus depots, in the car equipment shops, the train shops, wherever we have to fight him, we will, and we'll make his life miserable for the next 3 years. As long as he wants to tangle with the union, we're gonna give him that in return. Another accomplishment of ours, and I view it as an accomplishment, is that we assigned a staff person for the first time ever, full-time, to do strictly community outreach, to reach out into the communities, to organize student groups, rider advocacy groups, disabled groups, faith-based groups, to organize them into a riders union of sorts, so that when service cuts come in New York City, which consequently lead to layoffs, which we're suffering, that it's not Local 100 fighting this alone. Our members are embedded in the communities. Our grandmothers need paratransit services. Our children need to go to school. And we are now organizing full-time in an unprecedented way in the community with great success, so that when we fight an issue with the mayor of New York City, who's another miserable bastard, to be honest, named Mike Bloomberg, so when we're fighting these issues with him, it's no longer just a labor issue. It's a community issue, and we're standing side by side with these community groups, and the notion that Local 100 members are somehow distinct from the community or that we're enemies of the community has been thoroughly debunked in New York City.